Hello everyone, I'm Jane Hanlon again from the Mortgage Club, and welcome to today's Ask Jane. I'm joined today with Peter Barton from Ashfords, our panel solicitors, to discuss lease extensions and the issues and problems and queries that we have with equity release in this matter. Leasehold extensions, for most of the lenders, the minimum lease is 75 years, but for many lenders, they require leases in excess of that based on the number of years, something in the region of 175 to 185, minor to the age of the youngest. So if you take the 175 years and you've got a 75-year-old, you're looking for a 100-year lease. This becomes problematic as many of the leases fall short. So my question to Peter, and welcome to Ask Jane, how do you find out what it will cost?
Right, this is rather a long answer. I do apologise, everybody. Now, there are different costs for different types of lease extension. So I just briefly explain to Jane that there are two types of lease extension, and even with just by sight of a copy of deeds, it's always difficult to know which route you're going to follow. But starting from the beginning, Jane, obviously, as I always say to everybody, get a copy of the, email you or myself a copy of the deeds. You can obtain those and see from the deeds who the landlord is, which may indicate what the costs are likely to be. Now, two types. First type is the informal route. You typically see this with a private landlord, or where, for example, you've got a house which has been divided into 4 flats. The 4 owners of the 4 flats are all actually on the freehold of the deed, so they're almost their own landlords, as it were. On the informal route, the costs can vary. So if, for example, it is the 4 owners are actually their own landlords, then the costs are much lower on the basis that you won't have to pay generally, or you wouldn't expect to pay a lump sum premium to extend the lease, and you won't have to pay landlords survey costs or the landlord's legal costs throughout the process. You generally have to pay just your own solicitor fees. But we would say if we were acting in that situation to extend the lease, and we'd normally go as a right, as it were, extend it to 125 or by 125 years, we're looking at £1,500 plus VAT on the informal route. Now, sticking with the informal route, if I may, for a moment, in that situation where there's a private landlord, so for example, Jane Hanlon may own a raft of houses in Bristol, which she owns a freehold to. Someone comes to have an extension. Now, in addition to Ashfords fees of £1,500 plus VAT, the clients will find themselves paying a leasehold valuation fee, and the cost of that varies very much depending on the region the clients live. But the valuation fee can be anything from £500 to about £1,200, and that valuation fee then allows the landlord to determine what the lump sum premium will be, i.e. what lump sum does the landlord want to extend the lease. Finally, the landlord will also ask that you pay the landlord's solicitor's costs, which tend to have to be given on a legal undertaking basis from us, that they're payable by the clients irrespective of the matter completing or not. So the clients we do part way through, they're solely responsible for that, and they're typically in the region of about £1,000 to £1,500. So that's the private landlord route. So it's quite. So you're looking, I would say, roughly between £2,000 to £3,000 in costs going the informal route. Obviously, it's half of that if you are your own landlord, as it were. The other route is what we call the statutory route. This tends to be where the landlords are local authorities, but it can also apply in other situations as well, but typically it is the local authority route. In that situation, the landlord is saying, no, Jane, I won't extend your lease, go away. So Jane is using the statutory right to extend, which involves a lot longer timing. I know we're talking costs at the moment, but we're looking at 12 to 18 months to extend that. You have to go via the leasehold valuations tribunal, so you again have, and they're very expensive, the leasehold valuations tribunal, so you have valuation costs to pay, the tribunal costs to pay. You're looking at costs of between £5,000 to £10,000 to proceed with the statutory route. And as a word of warning as well, to advisors and to clients alike, there comes a stage, almost like in a property sale and purchase, when you exchange contracts, which tends to be a few weeks before you actually move. And the same applies with extended release on the statutory route. 6 weeks prior to completion, you reach a stage where the landlord can insist on being paid 10% of the lump sum premium due. So even before the monies have come through from the vendor, they can be asking for 10%. So it's one of those things that we say to clients at the outset of such a group, just be mindful that you're going to have to find this money from some source, either your own savings or from some other source, to pay that 10% deposit. And that's just a very brief overview of the cost, Jane.
Right, so it seems the informal route is obviously the quicker and the cheapest and less stressful.
Definitely the quickest, Jane. I'll certainly say that, and I'll say that for a number of reasons. Obviously, if it's internally managed by you are your own landlord with a few others, far cheaper, speed-wise. Obviously, depending on the management company that's being run by the owners, then it should be done. I'm not saying the same time scales as an equity release case, but if you're looking at most 1 to 3 months, I'd have thought. The statutory route, of course, you're looking at a minimum of 12 months, and that's purely because statutory notice periods have to expire, so that's the minimum of 12 months. What I would say, of course, is on the informal route, the documentation does have to go via the lender's solicitors, and they are, before it's all signed up, so they can have their own time scale onto this as they do within a sale and purchase case. So you're going to lose 2 or 3 weeks with documents being approved.
So in some cases, then obviously some of the lenders, the offers expire after sort of 42 days or 50 days. So do you find from your experience that the has to be reoffered on several occasions during the period?
Yes, I always say, Jane, when the first offer comes out, always just, clients often phone me, as you quite rightly say, in a panic, saying, well, Peter, where are we in the lease extension? We've only got 42 days before it expires. I always say to clients, look, just use the first offer and probably the second offer and third. Just use that as an indication that yes, we can borrow, and this is how much this is the amount of money that we can borrow, but ignore the interest rate. Realistically, on an informal route, we could be on the second or third offer. On a statutory lease extension, we could be, unfortunately, having to have fresh valuations done on the equity release side. So often it's the case that financial advisors let the statutory lease extension proceed quite a long way before they put the application in.
So really, it's up to the advisor to cover off client expectations over the cost and the time this will take. I mean, we are seeing the lenders now being quite harsh on the unexpired leases. They've all seemed to increase them through desktop. So are you seeing an increase of lease extensions coming across your desk now from July and August?
We are, and I'm glad you've raised that, because that's how I did wonder why there was an influx of them all of a sudden. We certainly are, and that also kind of links in with the more recent changes in the ground rent rules as to why there's been lots of, not necessarily lease extensions, but variations of leases. So we are finding quite an influx of some of lease extensions at the moment.
So on the lease extension, does it affect stamp duty at all?
It does, depend on the amount of the premium that's being paid. So you also have to, for example, we did a very expensive lease extension, a £1.6 million lease extension, and there was £80,000 of stamp duty to pay. And of course, exactly. So it's quite painful. But of course, the amount of the is influenced by a variety of things, such as the amount of rent being, the amount of service charge being paid, and the length of the extension. So it's I can't give you a straightforward answer on that, but certainly yes.
No.
Stamp duty is something to do with, unless of course it's on the informal route, and it's all in house in the sense of the client is also the landlord, and there's no charges being made, then there's no stamp duty to pay.
So, I mean, in a lot of cases, I would imagine it's worth doing because the property value goes up on that example that you've given.
Oh, it went up from 3 million to over £7 million up front. So it increases the value of properties immensely. And also, it just, with a lease extension, although some clients may say, oh, I can't be bothered to the source of damage after I'm gone. Of course, all you're storing up is a headache for your family when you're gone, because of course, you know, any mortgage company now, regardless of it being equity in the standard mortgage market, wants a minimum of 82 years on a lease. So if you inherited a property from mum and there's only 60 years left on the lease, before you can even sell it, you're going to have to get the lease extended.
Yeah, and you have to find the money to do it as well, don't you?
Exactly. You do.
So yeah, also from that example, obviously, there is an IHT issue for the advisor to manage as well. But it's obviously in the interest for the beneficiaries
Exactly.
to get it sorted. So, well, thank you for that. But I want to ask you now about ground rent and deed of variation that we occasionally come across.
Yes.
So most lenders require a ground rent of £250 per annum, or 0.1% of the property value. If it's within London, if I'm right, it's about £1,000.
Correct.
But if it's different to that, is that when the deed of variation comes into play?
That's right. So if you know, and often, you know, I've always used this as an example. There's a lot of properties that have these ground rent situations, and you're paying £1 a year, so that will be caught. But on other properties where ground rent is more significant, there's a change in the law several years ago now that, you know, there's an inference that where the ground rent is above the £250 or £1,000 in London, but actually it's no longer a leasehold property. It is in fact an insured short-haul tenancy. So this is what the lenders have. This is why they're raising this, because we're seeing, and as well as the lease extensions, we're seeing more and more of these on a weekly, if not daily basis at the moment.
Oh gosh.
So yes, it's you know, when you think of £1,000 for a ground rent in London, actually it isn't that much really, and even £250 in the rest of the country is a very small amount of ground rent. But the purpose of the deed of variation is it allows the client to go back to the owner of the ground rent, the landlord, the freeholder, to say, look, can this be varied so it doesn't fulfil with these rules? And of course, the landlord doesn't want to fulfil with the rules either, so they're generally amenable to alter that. And it just involves, you know, altering that clause within the lease rather than having to do the whole lease again. It's almost like a codicil to a will. It's just like an extra chapter that goes with the lease.
And we also get some that are ground rent linked to RPI, and it's increasing over 10, 20 or 25 years.
Yes.
Do you see many of those? And we do.
Certainly, particularly eversheds don't like the situations where it's going up in quite serious multiples. So again, we've got quite a few of those coming through. Just to give you an idea of costs for the audience, you're looking for a deed of variation about £750 plus VAT to alter them. And I know before you even ask me the question, Jane, I know that your next question will be, well, Peter, how long does it take? and really, it all depends on the landlord and who put the, because they'll you know, certainly they'll want to charge during the deed of variation. So if we're £500 to £1,000 of cost, time-wise, it can be a matter of weeks or several months. It tends to be on the quicker side with deed of variation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the leasehold and deed of variation. I think we've got that covered. So thank you, Peter. I'd like to ask you, the audience, if you've got any questions, we will be running more sessions. So please feel free to drop your questions to us, either online or by email, or just give me a call. We thank you for your time. I thank Peter for his time. I hope
Jane,
you enjoyed.
can I just mention? I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I've forgotten, my fault completely. It would now be a bad time to mention solar panels because, of course, they're deeds of variation as well.
No, carry on.
And they're also leases. So it's kind of, I know it's tenuous. So just as a thought for the audience, and apologies.
No.
As Jane and I both say to you all, you know, I know that you're all going back into the properties. Please don't forget to look up as you walk through, as you walk down the pathway to see whether there are solar panels on the roof. It should be two simple questions. Well, a simple question is, Jane, do you own those solar panels, or are they subject to a lease? And if Jane says, I own the solar panels, then you say to Jane, well, that annoying solicitor, Peter Barton, will be asking you for proof of purchase to give off to the lender's solicitors. And don't forget all that some lenders don't actually like owned solar panels. Now, if it is a leasehold solar panel, it's not a problem necessarily, but we always say if the solar panel lease is dated in 2014 or earlier, then it is probably defective. And I know that sounds a very broad brush, but what we're finding is that the 2014 and earlier leases miss out several clauses which the lenders want to see, which is namely, it gives the lender, the mortgage company, the right to repossess. That clause has been misstamped, actually, of the earlier solar panel leases. So in that situation, we always say to the advisors, if you see this as a solar panel lease, email us the lease as soon as even if it's after the first meeting. Don't wait to put your application. Email us a lease. We can do a check for you to see whether it does need variance, so that you can go back to the client and factor in those costs in time for your second appointment with the client. Cost-wise, from our end, you're looking at again about £750 plus VAT to vary the lease, the solar panel lease, and again, timing depends on how good the landlords are, or the owners of the solar panels. If it's something like British Gas, you're probably looking at about 12 months, but the likes of Sun and other companies tend to be, at least half of that. So sorry, Jane, for mentioning that.
That's right. No, that's absolutely fine. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Right.
So to the audience, then, questions, please, and thank you for your time. And keep doing the care files on our platform, because we'll plant a tree. Thank you.